This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program. This is All India Radio.
Good evening, listeners. Welcome to our national program of talks. Every year, 3rd of March is observed as World Wildlife Day, and to commemorate this day, we have for you a discussion on Kaziranga, a success story in conservation. Participating in the discussion are Mubina Akhtar, journalist and conservation activist, and Dr. Bibhob Kumar Talukdar, CEO of Aranyak, an organization for research and conservation of biodiversity. Here is Hansraj Patragohai initiating the discussion.
I welcome you both to National Program of Talks. Now let's begin with an understanding of what conservation signifies in Kaziranga's context. Is it merely the conservation of rhinos or tiger, or is it the conservation of the entire ecosystem that contributes to the making of Kaziranga?
Well, to me, the conservation in Kaziranga signifies first, the success of rhino conservation, and second, which is I feel is very important, it generated the epitome of conservation movement as a whole for wildlife conservation in Assam. Mm-hmm. So, rhino is a success story for conservation, but I think, because of Kaziranga, the other wildlife areas and other, wildlife are also getting priorities because Kaziranga signifies, it is the voice of Assam.
You're right. And coming over to you, being a journalist and conservation activist, you have been relentlessly putting forward your views, your opinions about the conservation process. So how do you look at the conservation process and the success story that goes in the conservation of Kaziranga?
The resurgence of the greater one-horned rhino from the brink is not only India's conservation success story, but it is the greatest conservation success story in the whole of Asia. Habitat loss and hunting has actually drove the greater one-horned rhino almost to the brink. But continuous conservation efforts with collaborative partnerships have just brought it back from the brink. And when we talk about collaborative partnership, it is not only the government departments, different departments like the forest, the police, or other departments, but it is also the conservation NGOs, the media, the public. Whole they work together relentlessly for the conservation of the species and along with more other species in the whole landscape of Kaziranga.
And now just as Mohit Akhtar has mentioned, NGOs play a pivotal role in the conservation process. Now, Aranyak being an organization for research and conservation of biodiversity, so what concerns or what are the concerns that needed immediate attention when it comes to Kaziranga?
Well, I think, the creating conservation awareness and sustained effort to keep it, is an essential component for long-term conservation, success. And secondly, the emerging issues, various kind of threats. Some of the threats are known, some of the threats are hidden, but they have potential to create more challenges in future. So along with, awareness and research, I feel, the information generations, a long-term research is essential, especially with regards to how the habitats are changing, how the rivers are shifting and, what are its consequences. So all these things needs to be studied so that, we can plan ahead. 10 years, 50 years ahead, keeping in mind that, because of climate change, because of, like the rivers are silting, so what kind of, futures we may have, and accordingly, we really need to put our conservation planning in advance. So that will ultimately ensure, the long-term security of Kaziranga, surrounding areas, and the, the ecological significance that Kaziranga is having. But one thing I would like to highlight here, that if we are talking about Kaziranga, we should not forget about Karbi Anglong, because this is an important, ecosystem. Without Karbi Anglong being conserved, the forest areas are conserved, Kaziranga alone cannot stand. So that's something I think we really need to look at, and the government is already looking into that, but we need to strengthen, the Kaziranga, Karbi Anglong conservations so that we can protect the whole landscape in order to secure the future.
Mr. Talukdar has said there are some hidden, some unknown factors also, but when it comes to the known factors like poaching, the floods, the human-animal conflict that keeps on happening more and more, and then we have this National Highway 37 passing through the hearts of the Kaziranga, and which of course prevents the animal movement along the animal corridors. Now, when it comes to poaching, many things have been done regarding, to eliminate poaching. Do you think what steps have been taken so far to ensure that poaching does not escalate into kind of a threat that would completely lead to the extinction of rhinos, the one-horned rhinos of Kaziranga?
Yeah, we have recently seen various efforts from the government as well as other conservation NGOs, biologists. Basically, it was the upgradation of the protection system with stringent field patrol that has contributed to a decrease in the number of poaching cases, and that also along with intelligence gathering. That was very important, and we have seen in the recent times, because when you compare the incidents in the 2010s and from 2011 onwards, there has been decline in numbers of poaching in Kaziranga. Number one is an upgraded protection system with stringent patrolling, and then again coming to intelligence gathering and a better park and community interface. Because without the help, without the coordination of the fringe people, you cannot achieve anything.
Exactly.
So constantly, and these have been the basic things for this decline in poaching in Kaziranga. That was one thing. And I also want to add something to what you have earlier talked about, the hidden challenges. One challenge that has come to the fore over the years is the flooding. We need flood for Kaziranga. Ultimately, Kaziranga is under riparian flats, inundated by the Brahmaputra. But it is the erosion that has become a huge threat over the years. So what we have to do to ensure the security of Kaziranga in the coming years, we have to take into consideration to bring all the side areas, the sandbars in the Brahmaputra that connects the Kaziranga landscape to other important forest stretches like the Kaziranga National Park, like the Laukhua, Burhasapuri areas, because these are also the corridors for the animals like the tiger, the rhino, the elephant. So we have to ensure the security in these areas for a long time sustenance.
Now coming over to you again, you said about the poaching. Now, what do you think are the main factors for which people come up and take up poaching? Is it just because of financial assistance, because of lack of certain amenities, basic amenities, and that's the reason why they come up for poaching, or are there any other reasons?
See, wildlife trade is the fourth largest illegal trade in the world, after narcotics, human trafficking, and arms. So this is an organized trade. It is not an opportunistic kind of opportunist trade. So there are people who are triggering it, maybe sometimes across the border. And they may use some of our local people as their local guides, because there is a demand in the Asian countries which are illegal.
You're right.
In India, the rhino horns are not being in use. It is being basically exported to other countries where there are demands. So because there are demands, there are pressures on our rhino populations. Now, fortunately, if we have seen in last few years, because of stringent protections measures initiated by Forest Department, also complemented by Assam Police, we must also acknowledge their role, because they are also very active, and it has reduced to 1. At the best, it will go to 0.
You're right.
It cannot go to minus.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, so it may again escalate. So we need to be, ever sensitive. Intelligence network needs to work even better so that we can sustain this kind of poaching activities.
Okay. And now coming over to another very important point is your organization Aranyak being working out with canines. That is one major thing that has been happening. So tell us something about that. How significant has been that move of using canines to chase poachers or to find out poachers in the area?
See, as an NGO, we always try to complement the efforts of the government. And we try where we can chip in and basically, assist. And we have seen that, from scene of crime, investigations earlier, with human capabilities were limited. So in South Africa, in other African countries, the sniffer dogs are being used very successfully. That's why in 2011, we brought one Belgian Malinois breed, which are being used by US Army for different of their operations. That was introduced to Povitara first, and then we have shifted to Kaziranga. There was demands. The dog unit gave good clue to the enforcement agencies, leading to arrest of more than 30-40 poachers in a span of 2-3 years time. Now we have 7 units. All of them are in the 4 rhino bearing areas in Assam. So it's basically a tool that the enforcement agencies can use, because dog has the sniffing power. It can give the vital clues from scene of crime to the exit route. And if the poachers, camp somewhere in nearby villages, they can identify. And then the human brains, like the brain of police and forest officials, starts. And I think there's a good complementing kind of things that has helped, in proper investigations from scene of crime.
You're right. And coming over to the use of forces, we already have the Assam Forest Protection Force, and now we have the Anti-Task Poaching Force as well. So do you think these are enough, or do we need to have more of such forces to especially curtail or prevent poaching from happening? As Mr. Talukdar has said, that from 1 it will come to 0. It cannot be minus. But still then, what do you think? Do we need more forces, considering the huge area of 430 square kilometers?
430 square kilometers is now the core area of Kaziranga National Park. We have more than 1,000 square kilometers when we come to the buffer. Kaziranga is basically growing. It has extended to the northern boundary also, to the other part of the Brahmaputra in the northern side. So we need forces, as you have said. I am thankful to the government, because it was a suggestion given to the government by us, like conservation NGOs. We have asked for the special rhino protection for Kaziranga in the line of special tiger protection force. So the government has heeded to the demand, and so we have now a special rhino protection force working in Kaziranga. The Assam government also raised few battalions for the cause of wildlife in Kaziranga, but still we need to think on the lines, because we have also the frontline staff, the forest guards. So every year many of the forest guards, they are retiring. So we need to induct new blood, young blood into the force, because tomorrow a forest guard is retiring, but we are not inducting new ones in their places. Recently the examination for constables for Assam police has taken place in Assam. Came to our mind that the government should go for inducting new forest personnel into the department. So sooner the better, because we are, like, as I have said, we need more young people in the protection of Kaziranga. Not only Kaziranga, but also we should not forget the Nameri National Park, the Dibru-Soikha National Park. Then there are 2 more new parks in Assam. So we need a huge force from the department itself.
And now Kaziranga, a success story in conservation, also owes to the people, because of the people's willingness to come forward and work with the NGOs. So tell us something about the collaborative efforts you have been reaching out to the people, especially those people who haven't had such a very stable economy, but still, and you have been reaching out to those people, you have been giving them kind of self-employment, and from which they have been able to get themselves away from such illegal activities as poaching.
Well, I think the economic activities, earning the income from good sources are very important, and helping the local villagers to earn the money from good sources needs some hand holding. And as tourism is growing, because tourism also is providing a lot of local support there. I remember during 1990s, probably only few gypsies were there for jeep safaris. Now I think throughout Kaziranga is close to 800. And then a lot of lodges are coming up. There are efforts, from NGOs, not only from our side, even from other NGOs, eco-development committees. They are engaging local communities so that they can get, the livelihoods. It includes training. We have also provided some training, basically, so that they can enhance. So I think it's a partnership effort. When the partners joins together to achieve the common goals, we are going to reach the target. Okay, so I think that is very important. Here, the success of Kaziranga is a combined effort of the governments, combined effort of the local communities, combined efforts of the NGOs and other civil societies. So that needs to continue, and that is a message we need to send across. That if we want to see success, we cannot work in isolation. Everybody's work needs to complement each other so that we can achieve. So Kaziranga has set a benchmark.
Right.
For other protected areas, now we need to make effort so that benchmark that Kaziranga has set, we are going to achieve it. And I think if we can keep our mind solid, we can achieve it, because for Kaziranga, if we have achieved, for other things also we can achieve it. So that's something in a message that should go across to all the protected areas and the peoples, in the surrounding areas as well.
Right. And yes.
I'd like to add what Bihagda has said. When it comes to tourism, what we have seen over the years, because of unregulated tourism, sometimes we have some problems arising in conservation. So conservation strategies and tourism must complement each other. So we cannot go on like jeep safaris should enter the park all throughout the months. It is not like complementary when it comes to conservation. I think conservation is the main goal for Kaziranga, and we need tourism. We need to boost our revenue generation. We need tourism, but there should be some regulations. It is not that because of the tourism, unbridled tourism, we have seen how our connecting corridors to different forests have been encroached over the years. Now, when you go for evicting those encroachment, a huge controversy takes place. So we need to get rid of those disturbances.
Well, coming over to that corridors, people make a hue and cry over the use of corridors. Now the government plans to come up with more animal corridors for their safety.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say regarding this? You have seen people, raising issues out of this.
Well, I think there are some, misinformations being spread. The corridors are basically connecting Kaziranga with another forest.
Yeah.
And corridors are not like very huge. Otherwise that would have been a forest itself.
Right.
Okay, so corridors are generally, narrow kind of things so that, the animals can pass from one. So I think first that is where we need to work with the people. I think the transparency is very important. That is where, I would request probably, the government agencies needs to put those things in social media so that people get good information.
Right.
Because if the informations are not available, it is easy for the people to be misguided. So we cannot afford that. So I think, this is a matter of, inculcating in their mind, first, their love for Kaziranga needs to continue. And secondly, the proper informations if they get, I'm sure, they will understand that.
And here comes the coordination between this forest department and revenue department, because people they are sometimes not aware whether that land belongs to the forest department or the revenue department. So in that particular area, I think both the departments need to work together.
Absolutely. And now considering the varied vegetation of Kaziranga, most probably we may not have those kind of vegetation in different parks. You have the grasslands, you have the woodlands, you have the swamp areas, the tropical evergreen forest and the deciduous forest. So how challenging is it, to undergo such conservation efforts, considering the different kind of vegetation that exist in Kaziranga?
First, I think, again, because of the breeding of the rhino or the elephant or the Asiatic buffalo, we just forget to talk about the Asiatic wild buffalo. I think Kaziranga has the world's highest population of the Asiatic wild buffalo, water buffalo. So these, along with the swamp deer, these are the big five of Kaziranga, the tiger, the rhino. So different vegetations complement their breeding, and especially the swampy areas. But over the years, what we have seen because of climate change, swampy areas, the habitat of these animals have been degraded because of more siltation, because of climate change. The process of drying of wetlands have become more fast, more rapid. So in that area, I think the landscape management, the conservation authorities, I think the park authorities, they need to put more efforts on conserving the swampy areas, the wetlands, for water retention during winter months. I think recently the Kaziranga authority, they have worked on some wetlands in the Burapahar range and also in the Bagori range, so that animals, they don't have to stray out for water during the winter months. So this needs to be taken, this whole method, this whole process have to be taken into other areas of the park and other wildlife areas in the state also. Climate change have become, as I have said, a hidden threat for conservation of these big animals, because mega herbivores like rhino or the elephant and or the buffalo, even the rhino, they need to wallow in mud. They need the wetlands.
Right.
For the elephant or for the Asiatic wildlife buffalo also, water buffalo also, it is very important, the wetland ecosystem. So we must also put enough effort for conserving the water retention capacity in these wetlands during the winter months also. So for that, I think landscape monitoring is the key, and the park authorities should put more efforts on that.
Right. I think you would like to add something to that.
Yeah, I think proper habitat management is essential as the number of wildlife populations there are growing. Like rhinos grew from 1,000 in 1980 to 2,400 now. But land almost remains same. Okay, so we cannot afford if there is alterations, because the grassland and wetland habitats plays an important role. Because based on the the strength of herbivores populations, including rhinos, the deers, the tiger population depends. If the herbivores population goes down, tiger will be compelled to come out and there will be conflict again.
Right.
So habitat management should be a very priority issues, for management authorities. And then the flow of water. The flood, as we said, it has good impact, it has little bit of bad impact. But flood is annually is important, because it's a floodplain ecosystems. Without flood, Kaziranga will face more problem.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think that is where we need to make a balance. We should not be, so much panic when flood comes. But then sometimes it's a natural phenomenon. It is the survival of the fittest. So whatever remains at the fittest gene, so that they can reproduce the fittest animal. So I think the proper information, scientific information needs to be fed in a decision-making process, so that we don't take any wrong decisions.
Right.
Because we have come almost 100 years with all good decisions to reach up to this level.
Exactly.
So I think that is where our informations, research inputs are very essential in order to take informed decision.
Right, exactly. And now being a journalist, how challenging has it been reaching out to people, teaching them, educating them that, as Kaziranga National Park is already a UNESCO and a heritage site. So how challenging has it been for a journalist like you to actually reach out and change the, mindset of the people at times?
The challenge is not from the people, rather it is sometimes from the people you work with. Because of different reasons. But what I have found over the years, I learned a lot. Whenever it comes to creating awareness through your writings, I think I feel I am successful in that, because over the last 30 years I have been continuously writing on the same topics for awareness, for conservation, different subjects, about different challenges, about different successful endeavors, about topics like wildlife, human-elephant conflict, human-leopard conflict, basically the human and wildlife conflict. So it is not only writing, but I think whenever we talk in different channels, in the media, also in radio, in TV, I think there are a lot of people who become enthusiastic learning, and they come to us. They want to work in the field also. I think there is an ardent followers of environmental journalists also. But to go and work with the people, that is very important, and in that we don't have any challenges, but it is basically writing the true facts. That has become challenging at times, because there are houses who may not only want whatever you write, exactly. Because according to their policies you have to change, and if you don't change, then there is no place for you, and you have to become a freelance like me.
Right. Now, considering the character, Kaziranga assumes from time to time, be it in the winter season, the autumn, the monsoon season. So, considering the fact that we may not have the best of technologies, but still, and you have been conducting research, and still, and we have been able to achieve this, a success story in conservation. I would like to know from you, how challenging is it at times for you to actually go out and do the research, considering the fact we do not have the technological advancements?
Well, I think if specifically to Kaziranga, the challenges are for long-term research, the accessibility. Because once monsoon start, and if you are working inside, then your visits inside, the national parks becomes a challenge. That's one challenge. The second is also getting, like the human resources as guide, like the forest guard. They are overburdened with night patrol, morning patrol, and then again, if they need to again accompany a research team, it always puts an extra burden. So, that those are some of the challenges that the Kaziranga is having, which are genuine, because the protection is of course the topmost priorities. But of late we have seen a lot of research are being encouraged. Even the park authorities are also doing research under the tiger monitoring. There are a lot of research going on with herbivores and also tiger, the tiger populations. So I think this is very important. And what I feel what is important is to do the research on habitat. Because it is the habitat that will feed. The numbers of animals depends on how best we keep the habitats.
Exactly.
The composition of wetlands, composition of grassland also, the wet grassland. Those are important other than dry grassland. We have seen over the time scale, the amount of the area of occupancy of dry grassland has increased, and area of occupancy of wet grassland has decreased. But the palatable grasses are basically in the wet grassland. Okay, and that is related to whether we have been able to successfully conserve wetlands. There are a lot of siltations in wetlands, so wetlands needs to be restored. And UN has already declared this particular decade as the UN decade for eco restoration. So I think that is something we really need to take as a big effort, so as to strengthen the research, and based on the research inputs it can strengthen the management.
You're right. And now with the National Highway 37 passing across the national park, more and more people say that the national highway should be removed from there, which of course is not possible. But still, then the animals would cross over from the other side to the other end. So, how big that challenge can be in over the years?
Yeah, that has become a challenge over the years. But now the government is talking of elevated corridors at some stretches, I believe. But we need to work on that with all the coordinating agencies. Before taking any drastic step, I think the government needs to talk with different stakeholders, because we have to think of the people living in the nearby areas or in the stretch to from Jakhalabandha to Bokakhat, a huge area. So we need to talk with different stakeholders before we come up with any plan.
And now, as the program has been aptly named a success story in conservation, Kaziranga, the journey so far has been a great one. We have achieved a success story. So, in your opinion, what are the other factors that we have to look into if we just want to retain this success story?
Well, I would again say, first, keeping the human resources at optimum level at every stages. The forest guards, the range officers, the senior officers, that is very important. Second is also long-term monitor with regards to the availability of water. Now, there are reports like Brahmaputra is drying. If Brahmaputra dries, it may have significant effect on Kaziranga. So if it is drying, why it is drying? Whether the other rivers that connects, with Brahmaputra, whether there are some issues. So I think everything needs to, because Kaziranga's future, as I have said, it depends on Karbi Anglong, but it also depends on other forest areas in upper catchment. Because if there is more destruction in those upper catchment, all this silt is going to be a problem for Kaziranga. So I think that Kaziranga's future, for 100 years futures, if we want to see, we need to see beyond Kaziranga. And then only, we can probably ensure that Kaziranga will stay 100 more years or 200 more years. And at the same time, Kaziranga should also help. The Kaziranga model should also help in overall wildlife conservation and conservation sites in Assam. So that should be, I think, our long-term motto.
To me, I think what is happening in the river, I mean the Brahmaputra, is there any intervention at the upper catchment? Why the river is drying, or why we have more floods in a year? Because we have seen in the last few decades, the frequency of huge floods, large floods have become more frequent. There have been. Earlier it has been like in 10 years we have a large flood, but now that frequency has been coming down to 6 years. So why this is happening? Is it only climate change is to be blamed, or is there intervention happening in the upper reaches of the Brahmaputra? So this needs to be taken into consideration.
Well, here I would like to thank you, Mubina Akhtar and Mr. Vibhav Talukdar, for being here and sharing with us the Kaziranga, the success story in conservation. And we do hope from here onwards that the conservation and the success related to conservation will carry on from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's really a pleasure talking to you.
You have been listening to a discussion on Kaziranga, a success story in conservation. The participants were Mubina Akhtar, journalist and conservation activist, and Dr. Bibhop Kumar Talukdar, CEO of Aranyak, an organization for research and conservation of biodiversity. The moderator was Hansraj Borpatra Gohai. This program was a contribution from All India Radio, Guwahati.
In our national program of talks tonight, this program came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.